Hey, welcome to the Travillian Next podcast. I'm your host, Amber Buker, Chief Research Officer for Travillian, and I'm super excited to bring you a conversation with another unique bank that's got what I think is a really disciplined approach to innovation that's being spearheaded by my guest today, EVP for the Bank of North Dakota, Rick Geloff. Rick's position was specifically created to focus on fintech opportunities and strategic initiatives at the only state-owned bank in the U.S. With $10.8 billion in assets and last year's ROA sitting at 1.90%, with a growing suite of services for other FIs, Bank of North Dakota is proving that innovation and strong performance can coexist. And now, here to tell us more about how that's happening, welcome, Rick.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Amber.
And when we met, Rick, I loved chatting with you because you were just so passionate about how innovation really is an imperative for all banks. So can you tell us a little bit about your role and why you feel that?
Yeah, definitely. I was brought in specifically around fintech and trying to figure out what the Bank of North Dakota's role is around fintech. And fintech is kind of this overarching word that we use to capture everything in financial technology. And so that kind of gave me a starting point to say, okay, nothing is off the table. And so I was brought in to look at things like stablecoin, cryptocurrency, embedded finance, banking as a solution, all these different things that banks maybe are looking at, or maybe are saying it's not for me. That's what I was brought in to look for and see how we can partner with our current FIs and what we can do to help kind of diversify ourselves as Bank of North Dakota.
And kind of the second part of that, why care about things like stablecoin? Why keep your eye on things like marketplace lending, right? It's a lot, and it's sometimes seems a little far outside the purview of your normal bread and butter banking. So why?
Yeah, I think what we find is that with these banks or fintechs that are getting into banking with an issuer on the backside, they're disrupting the industry, right? We've got companies like Chime, like Dave, like Current that are out there and kind of bringing in this new deposit base or the underbanked clients currently, and they're offering new solutions. And I think what I saw in the private industry was these disruptors then were gaining some market share and they were gaining our deposit base. And you and I both know that the deposit base is the lifeblood of any community bank. And so for us, it's kind of the same thing. We're looking at it as it's a diversification of our deposit base. We are at the Bank of North Dakota, we're a captive deposit base. We have 90% of our deposits in state agency funds. And so for us, in order to continue to grow to help out our financial institutions of North Dakota, we have to continue to diversify our deposit base and make sure that we continue to be relevant out there as well.
So it's a structural imperative for Bank of North Dakota, but it's also a more industry-wide imperative from your point of view too.
Yeah, I believe that banks need to look at this area and not just, embedded banking as a service, but also stablecoin and cryptocurrencies and what they're doing. And cryptocurrencies maybe not yet because they're not a mode of transportation of money. But as we saw with the Genius Act, now we're starting to get into stablecoin as a mode of transportation of money. And that's a different avenue than what we've seen with cryptocurrency in the past, meaning that it can take on the form of a transportation of a point of sale. And if that point of sale becomes imperative, then the banks, how do we transact in that? How do we continue to move money and make it more immediate than it's been in the past?
Yeah, there's all of these emerging payment rails, payment methodologies, things that are threatening to take interchange and deposit share away from banks. It's a lot. And your universe and your mandate is pretty broad. So how do you start to figure out what to pay attention to? It can be really easy to be overwhelmed. So what's your advice for deciding what is worth deeper investigation for your bank?
Yeah, I think for us, it's a research and development. So it's really keeping your ear to the ground and finding out what the industry is talking about. So when I think about how I'm hearing about these things, I'm reading newsletters, I'm reading the bloggers that are out there, the podcasts such as yourself to talk about these innovations. We're also going to different conferences, Money 2020, Fintech Meetup. We're members of Alloy Labs. We talk to AFC. We talk to IPA. So there are a lot of industry experts in there, and I can't understate the value there is in networking. I mean, I met you through a networking event that we had, and those relationships, they put you in contact with people that know a lot more than you. And when you get a lot of different viewpoints and a lot of different people involved, you can start putting together some pieces that you can decide what is best for your organization. And then overall, like, you still have to process all that information. Think about your risk tolerances. Think about what your bank wants to do, your financial institution. And those things become top of mind. They become your fintech strategies. And for us, as we just talked about, like, we decided that fintech strategy number one was we need to diversify our deposit base. We need to do that, but without competing with our North Dakota financial institutions. And I think that was imperative to our whole mission is, hey, we're going to do this, but it's also going to be part of our mission to help everybody out in North Dakota in order to continue on this route of financial services.
Yeah, and I think when we spoke, one of the interesting things that I loved about your perspective was that even though your mandate is so broad, you all actually run most ideas through a series of filters that are kind of based on, like you said, what is important to your bank. I think one of them was deposit diversification. There were a couple of others. Remind me what those were.
Yeah, so we had number one was diversification of our deposit base without competing with North Dakota financial institutions. Second one was aiding in the education and for an addition to our North Dakota partners. So meaning that we're going to take a forefront to that and make sure that they're as educated as they can be, bringing in partners. We're actually running a conference on October 8th for all of our North Dakota partners. And anybody else that wants to tune in online, we'll have a link available and you can register for that. But we want to be first and foremost a partner with our financial institutions, our associations in North Dakota, and bringing in stablecoin experts, bringing in crypto experts, bringing in industry experts in these spaces so that they can understand that. And the third is really diversification of non-interest income. I think that's a big point for all community banks out there. We typically only have one large kind of source of non-interest income if you're not running a trust department or insurance, and that being interchange income. And as we talked about earlier, stablecoin could upset that interchange income. And I don't think many people are talking about that yet, but I've been on some webinars that say that interchange could decrease as much as 60 to 70% if there was mass adoption for stablecoin. And not saying that that's going to happen tomorrow, but it's something that we have to keep our pulse on to see how that disruptor is going to happen and if we can help our community banks kind of thwart that.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, yes, you can look at anything, but it needs to serve one of those three purposes.
Yes.
So for banks that are kind of just getting started, the main thing that they probably want to think about is, what's their use case, what's their main pain point, and kind of start there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Use cases are imperative because you have to know what you're getting into, or else you're going to go down this rabbit hole of looking at everything and not know exactly which ones that should go first and which ones should go second. And really using your consultants, using your network of people to find out what other use cases are out there. I think what I found is that I might have some use cases that I know about, but the next bank might have way different use cases for that. And they're actually vital for what we do. So I need to incorporate those into what I'm thinking and help broaden those situations out, especially when we're in these new and innovative areas such as stablecoins, such as banking as a service, such as embedded banking. And there aren't a lot of banks doing these type of things, but there's a lot of banks researching them and trying to find out and lean on the industry experts such as legal counsels and core providers. Those are wealths of knowledge out there to help facilitate some of these conversations.
Yeah, it's interesting because even outside of the sort of, we'll say like leading edge innovation stuff, there's just so much value in talking to other bankers for, everyday things. I know, like, one of the things that I loved when I was involved with Alloy, which, as you mentioned, Bank of North Dakota is a member of the Alloy Labs Alliance, was that people would have completely different ways that they're using the same technology.
Hmm.
So it would be like, oh, that's interesting that you use it for disputes. We use it for XYZ and it works really beautifully, right? And so you never know what connections, efficiencies can come along with also the big ideas, right? That could be potentially a much simpler solve for what it is that is your pain point.
Yeah, and what I've noticed too is that the industry, especially in this niche area, is very welcome for questions. They want to talk about it. There are so many fintechs out there right now that are searching for partners, and the ones that have already been in it kind of have their pick of the litter of which ones are out there that they want to take on. But there are all these underserved fintechs out there that need partners, that want partners, but they also don't want to go into it having just a sole partner, because what if that partner then gets regulated by the FDIC and they lose out on that partnership? I mean, there are all these things to consider when you're looking at this, and it's so nice to have partnerships and to be part of associations where the members want to help out everybody. And it's not like it's a big competition. Yeah, it's competitive, but it's more like, hey, we need more banks involved in this.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you brought up there are more fintechs looking for partners. It's been a really interesting, year and change for banking as a service as a whole. I've written about for Travillian, kind of the wave of consent orders that we saw in that space. So I'm wondering, Rick, as community bank boards in particular are watching things like banking as a service having all these consent orders and they're thinking absolutely not. You mentioned the importance of helping boards understand that there are safer deposit sources, safer opportunities out there. And I know that you're looking at some ways that you can help other banks get into banking as a service. So how would you advise bank leaders that they approach risk discussions in an innovation setting? Like, how are you approaching the board in a way that acknowledges that risk, but finds a way to move forward, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's important that we all understand that, yes, there are risks involved. And we can't, as banks or financial institutions, absolve ourselves from any of that risk. BSA, AML, KYC, proper board governance, proper board education. We have to make sure that that is at the forefront. And that's also why you get legal counsel. That's why you get consultants, because they're going to help kind of give that independence view, not just from a guy that's trying to sell his board on everything that there is around these topics. But I think that's what's important, is that you have these open and honest conversations inside of your C-suite before you even get to the board. Like, you guys everybody has to be on the same page. Your executive team down to your compliance staff, your audit staff, everybody has to understand. And then you can take it to the next level when you write your business cases, do your risk assessments, and how you explain it to your board is then you come up with your mitigants and how you're going to mitigate these risks. And don't leave any risks out, because they're all important. And the examiners are going to want to see that too, that you just didn't hop into this thing lightly and that you took the proper steps. And that truly gives the board a view. But there's also this piece of board education and making sure that they understand what you're getting into. And so if you leave things out, it becomes very difficult to say that they've been educated and they've been brought along for the ride as well. For me, it's always been about transparency. We're not going to leave anything out. We're going to give it all to you and help you digest it. And hopefully that doesn't come in a 400-page packet. It becomes a condensed version that AI helps you write or something like that. But it's important to give them all the meat and potatoes around it.
Well, and it's interesting because as you kind of build a culture of innovation, that becomes less of a hurdle, right? Because that education has been ongoing at some point.
Yep.
We all have kind of a familiar shared language around what we mean when we say issuing and what we mean when we're talking about BAS. But it does definitely take time and repeated regular conversations and educational touch points, because the world is really fast. It's moving really quickly. And again, it's just a little bit outside of, what traditional banking looks like a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And you're don't get me wrong. I mean, you're still gonna have banks out there that are like, this isn't for me, and that's great if that's what they decide. Everybody has to decide for themselves what their risk tolerance is, how they're gonna mitigate those risks to make sure that it's as buttoned up as it can be. But there are a lot of different options out there. We just mentioned a few, and there are different technologies that we're even looking at, like underwriting platforms, like AI driven assistance, and agentic AI is now the buzzword around there. So, I mean, there are, even if you're not looking at banking as a service, embedded banking because of the consent orders, there are other fintechs out there that you can get into, reg techs that can help maybe create some efficiencies in the back office. And that kind of goes around our whole gamut of things that you might be able to process inside your organization.
Say more about that, the things that you might be able to process inside your org.
Yeah, well, I think the key one is AI, as we all kind of have been talking about. There are fintechs right now that are building like Lendio and Llama.ai, these lending platforms that help underwriting and decision making, and even throughout the process and getting all the way into the back office and the efficiencies that can be gained from that. And we all know as bankers, we try to get that efficiency ratio as best as we can inside of a bank to make sure we're operating at a prime number. And even if you can't see what's going on in these other areas and generating those deposits, maybe you don't need deposits right now, but maybe you can gain some on this efficiency side of integrating softwares that can make jobs easier in your back office. Not saying that this is a reduction of force. This is going to be efficiencies of scale so that you can process faster, make faster decisions, get your customers dollars faster, especially on the lending side. So that's kind of what we're looking at overall. It's the movement of funds quicker. As you probably know from your personal life, and me too, like all of our kids want instantaneous. Like it's the instantaneous movement. That's why social media is so good. Well,
Mm-hmm.
we sooner or later our money is going to get there. That's why people pay $3.95 for Venmo instant access. That's why PayPal has instant access. So there are a lot of things I think bankers are looking at now.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you have a great and really unique setup for your culture and your team there. And of course, Travillian is an executive search firm. So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about your leadership journey, Rick, because it's really interesting. Your role was created, but that was after you worked with Bank of North Dakota's current CEO, John Morgan, at a previous bank. So can you walk us through how that relationship evolved, and like, is this position kind of designed around your expertise? And then, what can you say about how other banks should be thinking about structuring their team for innovation, having the right people in the right place?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that this was necessarily structured around my strategies or my forte into this. Don and I have had a relationship for a long time. I was a CEO or CFO, COO at a prior organization. We dove deep into fintech for about 4 years, 5 years before this journey kind of took us this direction. We were in the process of standing up a large program, and before I left, I got that all stood up and kind of kicked off. Um, Things happen in life, and you end up in a different situation, and opportunities open themselves up. So, as a search firm, it's awesome to have relationships with you. It's awesome to have relationships with others that can help navigate those waters. Um, Bank of North Dakota kind of set out that they wanted to do something in fintech, especially with the movement in that direction, to make sure that they had diversification of deposits. And given the relationship, I was able to apply for that and got selected to get into that position and help this bank kind of move forward in that journey.
Awesome. Well, I love that you are still working with, good colleagues and building something really unique. Is there anything else that you may want to let our audience know? More info about your conference on October 8th. Of course, Travillian's is on the 9th, but I'm sure that people could get on a plane and make it to Philly. So, yeah, anything else, Rick, that you wanted to leave folks with?
Yeah, October 8th, we're going to have a Banking Beyond Borders conference presented by Bank of North Dakota. In present, we're looking for all banks in North Dakota and financial institutions in North Dakota to be involved, have a seat at the table, get front row access. We're going to bring in cores. We're bringing in stablecoin cryptocurrency experts. We've got our North Dakota Department of Financial Institutions. We've got law firms and consultants and all sorts of people that will sit on panels and talk about this. But we're hoping to help educate the banking community in all aspects. And if you're not a North Dakota financial institution, you can go to our website at bnd.gov, bnd.com, and you can log on to the fintech side and register for the link so that you can view it along with everybody else on October 8th. So even if you're going to Travillian, you can actually go out there and register for the link so that you can get it and view live.
Love that. Okay, so even our attendees can make sure that they're there.
That's right.
That was wonderful. Okay, and that was bnd.com.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Rick. This has been really enlightening, and it's good to call you friend. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Amber.
All right, thanks a lot.